Hello and welcome to another League of Legends guide, and in this one, for all roles and building on the ganking video I did a few months ago, which was specifically for junglers, I want to take a look at some of the differences you see in ganking techniques and success rates depending on the MMR you're playing in, while of course looking at challenger examples to show us how it's done. Naturally, I spend more of my time VOD reviewing and looking at replays than actually playing, so I see a wide array of successes and failures in terms of ganking that are either the laner's fault or the jungler's fault. So stop blaming each other, because I guarantee you if a gank goes really badly, someone made a bad decision or made a bad mechanical play somewhere in the process that caused it to fail. Now, I have a replay of a gank that sort of inspired the nature of this video, because there were so many things that went wrong in terms of decision making and execution that really shouldn't happen in the Diamond MMR game that it was in, and I thought it would be a good learning experience from an all roles perspective. We have Ornn support, we have Draven ADC, and we have a Kha'Zix jungle. Now, the nature of the replay and what I'd seen thus far when I sort of started questioning the actions was that the enemy Twitch jungle hadn't had the best game, but he had ganked bot lane numerous times. This had given a huge summoner spell, level advantage, gold advantage, item advantage to the Ezreal and the Pyke, and thus the Draven and Ornn were pretty much being shoved in and could not get any vision control or any sort of lane control whatsoever. And so as the Kha'Zix eventually decides he wants to come and gank on the bottom lane here, you see that he puts a control ward over the wall just to see if that bush is warded, and you will see the passive aggressive pings of there's a ward there, can you clear it? Now, very clearly from a laner perspective, you're saying, well, obviously no. We have been shoved in, we have been ganked multiple times. Obviously, we don't have any river vision control whatsoever. As such, the Ornn and the Draven are nowhere near level 6, whereas Pyke and Ezreal will be very close. And as soon as one of them goes to clear that pink ward, they're going to be hooked and killed immediately. Now, this comes into junglers. You guys, you need to understand lane states, and you need to understand that maybe you've been having a great game on the top side, but the enemy junglers had a great time on the bottom side, and so your lane just really doesn't have any of the same impact. Now, Kha'Zix hops over the wall, ults, flashes, commits everything to the gank. Naturally, he dies. And Draven also follows and dies, and the Ornn is pretty much just stuck trying to hit the wave because there's minions. He's low HP, literally a few spells from Ezreal, a couple of autos, and he dies. And because Pyke and Ezreal hit level 6 after the double kill onto the Kha'Zix and the Draven, now the Ornn has to waste his flash again, escaping the Pyke ultimate. And he was lucky to survive the Ezreal ultimate in the first place. Now, if we rewind just a little bit, you will see also, as the gank's beginning, the Xerath on the Kha'Zix's team is pinging that Galio is on his way, and we all know what Galio's ult does at this stage. The Kha'Zix was so annoyed with the bottom lane for dying to Twitch a few times, he really overcommitted to a gank, and the whole concept of layering your CC, being on the same page, understanding the lane states, level 6 power spikes, what summoner spells up, all of these things just went over the Kha'Zix's head in his pure, unrelenting greed to try and force something. And as such, the lane is completely dead now, and they never recovered. The game was actually lost. And so this got me thinking about what do challenger players do in comparison to Diamond that we can show as a contrast to this. And it's all about setup. Laners, you need to understand when someone comes to gank for you, you're not always waiting for the jungler to initiate. You need to make that first move, the trade even if you have no CC, starting the trade, and then the jungler comes in as you begin the trade can turn the tides, because the enemy laner uses their spells, maybe they lose their dash, they're distracted by the fight you're having, and here comes your jungler to save the day, and you pick up some kills. Now, the Kha'Zix just went gun-ho and sort of spamming the Ornn and the Draven afterwards, expecting them to have done more, to committed more. It was just a forced and bad gank overall. Now, the whole concept of setting up your gank for future comebacks is very important. Just look at this Rengar example. He comes in through the lane, activates his scanner, and sees wards in both bushes. Well, now of course he can clear them. So what he does is he does a few clears, a drive-by here and there on the rest of the map, and returns a minute or so later, knowing that his lane, because of his presence, simply clearing the wards, allowed his bot lane to push up a bit more, because the enemy bottom lane would now be thinking, hey, maybe there's a Rengar in the bush at any given moment. That mental warfare in terms of your ganking can set up future ganks. As such, the Zyra hits the E on the Lucian, Rengar jumps onto him, and they grab themselves a free kill and a flash from the Thresh. This is what the Kha'Zix should have done in the first example. Clear the control ward, maybe clear the Tribush ward, relieve pressure from your bottom lane, put yourselves in the mind of the Ezreal and the Pyke, and then you can come and lane gank or river gank once again once the lane's in a better state, and your bottom lane has perhaps hit a power spike and has summoner spells ready to use. Now, in terms of setting up your CC together, let's look at this Camille example. And yes, this is from the current patch after her small buffs that she just got. Level 2 ganks, get ready, if they take away the scuttle, you're gonna see more of them again. And the Galio charges up his stun and flashes in before the Camille had charged up her hookshot. Naturally, based upon the body language of the enemy, it wasn't warded, and they probably haven't seen a Camille in so long they weren't really expecting that E-gank at level 2. Now, had Camille started a hookshot and then the Galio flashed in, Camille would have hit the stun on the Sona and been able to chunk her a bit more, all while burning her flash. Maybe they don't kill her, but at least they would have chunked her a bit more than they did because the Galio went in too soon for the Camille, and as such, Camille's stun didn't land and they simply burned her flash and got the Galio's flash in conjunction with that. Now, Sona without flash is much more prone to ganks than a Galio without flash, so it's not the worst trade, it's still a good trade. However, they would have wanted a bit more damage, and so you can see even at the challenger level, sometimes syncing up your CCs to stack them properly, who goes in first, can be even slightly misaligned, and that can cost you kills and notable damage. And in challenger, these little things can affect the outcome of a laning phase, sure, not so much in lower MMRs. Now, the Camille goes to the top lane and is prepared to go back, however the enemy Akali dashes into the Vladimir on her team, and that's a sign to, hey, stop shopping, maybe we can pick something up here. And that's where you need to be aware of who goes in first. But as soon as the enemy laner commits to a trade, commits to making a move, that's the sign to go in as a jungler, and your job as a laner is to try and invoke that and try and bait them into making a move like that. Even if you're low HP, trust your jungler to come. Obviously, the lower you are, you're going to be less inclined to trust your jungler, but we're going to look at two lower MMR examples in a second to show you that it can be laners and junglers' fault. And now this is what I'm talking about. Who goes in first? When do you go in first? Who uses their CC first? This all depends on matchups. Who has CC? Who has damage? The biggest difference between all MMRs when you look at ganks in terms of lane, supports, whoever's doing the roaming or ganking, the jungling, whatever, it's the synergy of who goes in first and the angles you use to get your ganks off successfully. As soon as the Camille had bought after the top lane gank, she goes directly to the mid lane. The Zed sees her coming. Now, as soon as Camille's primed, even if she's in vision of the enemy Aurelia, as soon as she's primed to hookshot, the Zed goes all in as he can, hits his ignite, hits his spells, gets his damage off, and the Camille can now land her CC at a crucial moment that prevents the Aurelia escaping, and she dies. So the Zed, even without a CC, goes in first to do the chunk so that the follow-up CC will guarantee a kill on the enemy laner. So being a laner who doesn't do anything, now if the Zed was a lower MMR Zed, perhaps he just waits for the Camille to go in first, but the Aurelia will see her, and she just backs away. And she escapes because no damage was done. She can flash after the hookshot and she lives. This way, the damage is done in a surprising amount of time for the Aurelia before she can flash, and the hookshot lands immediately afterwards, and she dies very quickly. Now, if your lane doesn't have CC, if you're ganking level 3, level 4, like this Warwick example, being very decisive with your CC is crucial. Flash, E, get the stun, let your Katarina get off the ignite and the damage, and even though the Victor has his own disengage, his flash, his barrier, the damage is enough to secure the kill. So in that case, the jungler's using the opportunistic approach of CCing the enemy surprisingly, while the laner dishes out all the damage they can. Now obviously the Warwick here transitions to the top lane and hits a very nice Q follow through into an E fear onto the Shen, and this lets the gank actually get a kill on him as well. Now that's more of a mechanical play that's taking use of the kit that you have as a jungler, but decisive movements up into a lane and making those plays can be very important. Let's look at an example of a lower MMR game, and I'm just going to describe what's happening here. The Master Yi and the Jax are trying to get off multiple ganks onto a Karma. But notice how in these ganks he's walking up to the Karma to try gank, the Jax is coming back to lane, they're not really on the same page of syncing up the ganks. There's a disconnect between what the jungler should do and the laner should do. Now let's just look at a higher example. I will actually use my own Ornn jungle here, and notice how the Aurelia's also coming back to lane as I'm coming up to gank. And you have to time it quite well to prevent the Jax from hopping away and perhaps flashing out of the situation also. And this way I'm baiting him in to using his counter-strike without using my CC and inviting him to leap to me to come to my direction. Now I'm Ornn, so I have a lot of CC, I'm next to a wall, and Aurelia is right there with her stun as well. and as soon as he tries to do anything, once his counter-strike's finished, basically that's just knock on the wall, W smackdown, and he's dead. However, the difference between, say, a challenger and a diamond player is you see this diamond Rek'Sai, their approach is cute. They're trying to cut off the enemy. And in one example, sure, you can kill the Xerath by yourself, go for it. No one's going to stop you, that's a great play. However, if your lane is being engaged on by the enemy, and you take a huge angle of approach, well, your team's just going to die and you've done nothing. Now, the champions you play can naturally affect your ability to gank, but look at this Silver Ornn. He goes into the tri-bush, he wants to gank in the bottom lane, but what CC does his lane have? He has a Soraka and a Kai'Sa. So, if it is warded and he wants to approach the gank, you're against the Tristana and a Sona. The Tristana can easily escape the gank, and you are the one that would have to initiate and make something happen. Now, because it's warded, you actually can't. His angle of approach was okay, he was taking the long loop like we discussed in the previous video, but because the lane was just in a bad state and they have no CC to set it up, and also they weren't ready to. You can see them, they're just happy farming, they're not really striving to set up the gank. The Ornn would have loved to have just gone in. Maybe his lane could have baited in a fight a little bit. All of these things need to factor into your mind as a laner when you're low MMR as well as a jungler. Laners, help your jungler. Maybe trigger a fight, even if it's warded. If you can trigger a fight, well, the Ornn can ignore that control ward and go straight in. Look at the Camille from earlier. Roams from the mid lane to the bottom lane. It's warded, doesn't care. I have my ultimate, I have my hookshot. Locks down the enemy ADC, and that's a free kill. Now, obviously, Ornn can't do that, and also he's level 4. If he was level 6, maybe he can. But the whole concept is still the same, and links back to the Kha'Zix earlier. Understanding the lane state and where you should look to gank in the first place, maybe you don't even waste time in the bottom lane, and you simply clear the ward, and off you go. Maybe you can come back at level 6 and exploit it. Now, this lower MMR example to close, just to show you that there are so many facets of what I've discussed in this video not done in your games that you can really use to win more laning phases, which in turn, if you win more laning phases, that's more heralds, that's more towers, that's more free LP for you. Look at this Jax, he's gonna go level 2 gank on the enemy Riven. The Riven clearly has not warded the bush and is on her way down to do so. However, look at the Mundo, there's top laner. There's a huge mini wave against him. Jax has only done red and scuttle. It would have been better served to perhaps get level 3 or at least take in another buff in order to be close to level 3 that 1 minion dying in the lane would give him such a power spike. But the real problem here is that he uses his gap closer to gap close when the Riven doesn't need to be gap closed. What I mean is you want to try and save your gap closes to when the enemy flashes or begins to use their dashes, because if you waste it, there's nothing you can do but flash to stun. Which is exactly what he does. The problem is it's into an enemy cannon minion wave at level 2. That's pretty much a suicidal bet. At the same time, the Mundo has gone back to farming his wave. They were not on the same page. Now, if the Mundo hits his cleaver onto the Riven, if he gets a little closer, perhaps initiates as she goes to ward, if they really want to do that gank, as she goes to ward, he hits his cleaver to slow her, the Jax can perhaps stun her as she begins her Q animations. This might force Riven to flash out, and then you can come back in a little bit when you are level 3 and abuse the fact that she doesn't have her flash up. So there was a lot of things wrong with the breakdown of that gank. I mean, watching the minion waves, bad flash, using gap closers too soon, and the laner not setting up the slow in the first place. So it might seem a little bit ranty, and I suppose it was, but the whole point I wanted to get across to you all was junglers, pay attention to lane states, pay attention to what's going on in terms of summoner spells, look around the map and have an idea of when you need to clear vision and come back. Laners and junglers, both of you, know who has the CC, know that you need to bait a fight before the jungler comes so that you can abuse the fact the enemy's distracted and perhaps use crucial spells before your jungler shows up. And junglers, please pay attention to using a variety of approaches in your ganks through lanes, through the sides, through flanking from behind, and if you get summoner spells, come back, repeat and abuse. Don't let the 5 minutes expire where they don't have summoner spells to the point that it basically meant your gank was really for nothing. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you were able to enjoy and learn something. Please like, share, and comment if you did. Keep your eyes out for an upcoming stream. I will announce it on my Twitter and my Discord. Subscribe for more League of Legends and jungle videos coming very soon. And as always, I will see you all in the next tutorial.